Welcome to the Solution Nation podcast. My name is Sean Snowday, and I'm the president of Solution Nation. Solution Nation is dedicated to providing a platform for investors to learn about Israel's most dynamic public and private companies. We interview lead venture capitalists, Wall Street analysts, investment bankers, and managers of incubators and accelerators. Today's guest is Tal Paperin with KSW Solutions. The topic is investing in Israeli industrial Internet of Things companies. Some of the things we'll be discussing is how important is 5G, to what extent are employees and unions opposed to Israeli industrial Internet of Things companies' deployments, and can it legitimately be called a green technology? Please remember that all content provided on the Solution Nation podcast and website is for educational purposes only. Nothing shall be construed as investment advice. Investment decisions shall not be made based on information, written, verbal, or otherwise, posted or spoken on Solution Nation. Conduct your own research or consult with your own investment advisors before making investment decisions. So here's my good friend, the host of the show, and the CEO of Solution Nation, David Wanatik.
This is David Wanatik. Welcome to Solution Nation. The focus of this program is Israeli Industrial Internet of Things, Israeli Industrial IoT. Speaking on this topic, I'm very pleased to welcome Tal Paperin. Tal Paperin is a vice president of global sales at an Israeli IoT company backed by Sun Corp of Japan. Tal has a long career in sales. He's done a lot of dedicated personal sales, one-to-one sales, made a lot of sales to large companies. He's made a lot of sales all over the globe. He's also done a lot of business development work. He's created a lot of strategic plans. He's interacted with many investors, venture capitalists. He's closed a lot of deals personally. And he's also trained and developed and recruited sales forces. He's also managed lots of budgets and pipelines and located distributors and integrated distributors with his own sales force and done quite a bit in that regard. Tal speaks English, Hebrew, Russian, and Chinese. And it's a pleasure to have you with us, Tal.
The pleasure is all mine, David. Thank you for the introduction. Good introduction, all in all.
Good.
But a quick, another small addition, I mostly consult companies. Besides the fact that I'm a VP of global sales, I do that as a service, meaning companies from all over the globe are hiring me to help them reach new international markets and in general, help them with their current state of sales.
Okay. So my understanding is you have an expertise in Internet of Things and SaaS, but you've sold quite a few things other than those two products.
That is true. Out of my 20-some years of sales career, the main focus was always IoT and software.
Okay. Well, having a good salesman is crucial. You can't run a business without sales. So I'm sure your services are very much in demand.
You'd be surprised, but though whatever you just stated sounds logical, so many companies do not know that. So many companies out there, all over the globe, and Israel especially, they're very good at coming up with a product to the market. They spend millions of dollars on research and development, and they can come up with a great product, be it software or hardware or any other product. And then they fail miserably. They fail and they go under. They fail because they seem to unable to understand that the end of the day purpose of the company is to generate revenue.
Right.
A lot of companies are run by engineers or the founders are part of the original development team. They do not understand that. So whatever money they'll get as funding, as initial capital rise, they'll put into development. And only when it's way too late, they realize the fact that they need to be generating money. They need to generate profit. They need to have sales. And that requires investment as early as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think a lot of CEOs that are founders of companies, they almost take offense when customers don't understand the brilliance of their product. And sometimes that's not good. You need somebody that's maybe a little less emotionally attached that can close a sale. That's very important. So anyway, all right. So we can start talking about industrial IoT. What
Sure.
is industrial IoT?
So industrial IoT is a relatively new concept. A couple of decades ago, it was called M2M, machine to machine. Companies, especially companies in industry, big companies, Philips, Toshiba, companies in Japan, and also companies in Germany, they realized the fact that you can no longer continue manufacturing the way you did 100 years ago. Ford Model T was the first conveyor production. Then you had the first industrial revolution, then you had the second. And now the experts saying that we are in the fourth industrial revolution, or it's called Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 is a huge book of what is it that it means, but basically it means connectivity when machinery talks to other machinery, and you as the end user or the one that uses those machines, or you're running that production, you not only need to be able to know exactly what's happening with each machine, but you also need to be able to predict certain things. You need to be able to predict performance. You need to be able to predict pipelines and break time, downtime, and so many other things. IoT, Internet of Things, that's the new term that replaced M2M, means that everything is connected. You have a smartwatch. You have a watch that's connected to the cloud. Your vacuum cleaner, not obviously your cell phone, but any part, like my laundry machine has an app. There's a chip where you put your phone down and you can see the performance of your laundry machine. You can turn on your kettle to boil your morning coffee from your bed with your phone. That's Internet of Things. IIoT is Industrial Internet of Things, meaning that that's nice that I have my kettle boiling for me, but if I run a factory and the machinery there cost me dozens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of machinery, I need to be able to not only know the exact status of that machine, I also need to know not only RPMs or water level, oil level, temperature, and other parameters. I also want to know how it's going to perform, what can I expect from this machine in the long run, and I need that specific machine to communicate with all the other machines on the production floor, and all of that communicating with the central command of the factory or even of the headquarters of the company. That's briefly what's IoT.
Is the border of IoT the premises of the factory, or is the definition of IoT deeper into the supply chain? So would Ford Motors know what's happening at their steel production vendor, or what's happening on the truck that's delivering the steel to the Ford factory?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's the latest. The key word here is visibility and traceability, meaning that nowadays the production chains and the supply chains are global. So the raw materials are coming from one continent, from several countries. The production is on another country with some other countries. Then it's all been packed and shipped to another destination. So the stakeholders and the decision makers want to be able to see the entire chain. Now, the beauty of IoT or just any software is that you can break it down, meaning that if I'm the owner of the factory, I just want to know that there are no problems. So I can get alerts or notifications in case if there's an issue with the production. But if I'm the maintenance manager, I care about other parameters. I want to know exactly how much oil is consumed, how much raw material is consumed, what's the expectancy, when do I need to do maintenance and upkeep, and many, many other parameters. So you get the visibility throughout the chain. So a small step back. Nowadays, there's the exact problem, the exact opposite problem of what you had previously. If previously you had no idea what was happening throughout the chain, later on with the machine to machine and the IoT, you became flooded with the data. It's very cheap and easy to install hardware that communicates with the servers throughout the supply. And then you get millions of data entry points. So many companies came up and they're net software companies. They say you can use whatever hardware you want. And many companies out there manufacturing hardware. Send us the data and we'll present the data in a way it'll make sense to you, because that's the end of the game. You want to have data based on which you can make a decision, whatever your job is.
So is IoT more along the lines of sensors that are sprinkled throughout the factory on different pieces of equipment, or is it more the software that runs everything, or do those things get blended together as one unit?
So the dry definition is simple. At the first level of the system, the IoT system, you need to have some kind of device that collects data. Those devices are usually called sensors. The sensors are either external, meaning somebody manufactures them, or so many companies already manufacture their equipment with pre-built sensors. All modern machinery from Japan, Switzerland, and Germany, it all comes with pre-installed sensors. So you get that collects data. This data is then being broadcasted to the cloud, either by itself or through some kind of a hub, a controller of some sorts. In the server, some manipulation happens with the data. It's either analyzed, or you have a BI or an AI that runs on this data, and then it's presented to you in a graphical user interface, in a GUI of some sorts. So the sensors, the data, the server, and the software, that's called IoT. It's a combination of things. So many companies come to the end user or to the customer and they say what really matters is, and then they'll emphasize their own field of operation. So if the company does only software for IoT, they'll say everybody can give you data. What matters is the way it's presented, our software. Somebody does only AI, so they say forget the software, you need something to analyze it, so it's AI. Somebody will say, no, the quality of the data begins with the sensors. We know which data to send up. So they'll emphasize the sensors. That's the industry.
Okay. So if Ford Motors has an old factory and they want to keep the old factory because there's so much investment in that factory, but they want to make it IoT smart, how would they do that? Would they put a little sensor on every piece of equipment, every foot of equipment? How would that work?
So it begins with the end goal. What is it that you would like to receive? The simplest solution would be a hardwired sensor. You need to start pulling wires. You plug a sensor into every piece of equipment that you would like to monitor, and you pull wires to the control room. That's classic and kind of obsolete. Nowadays, there's wireless sensors, meaning it looks something like a little USB stick, the size of a AAA battery, and you can place it. So somebody just goes with a boxes of those, places them whatever he wants, and they wirelessly broadcast all the data. It's very efficient, very quick, and very easy to both install and operate.
So would each of those little sensors have to be programmed to detect different problems?
Right. So that depends on the level of automation you want to reach. For example, if all I want is just information, then it's very easy. Those sensors sometimes even come pre-programmed. He knows how to measure different parameters, and it has different thresholds, and it knows how to do different things. But often, just measuring isn't enough. You want the next step to be an automation, meaning, for example, I'm giving you an example. I want a sensor that if it detects a water leak, I want it to close the valve and shut down the water. So it's very easy to put a sensor that will detect a water leak and send an alarm. You'll get a notification to your phone or to your email. But you also will have to install the actual valve that communicates with the sensor. And that is just a very simple example because modern day production is much more complex. For example, if you're mixing compounds, okay, you're manufacturing steel, and if you want a sensor that measures the quality of the steel, and if it measures that this much of X, you want a mixer to add 20 milligrams of an additive. And if it's added too much, you want down the line something to happen. So it's a whole manufacturing chain that need to be programmed into the sensors, controllers, the servers, and the software that operates all of that.
Uh-huh. In installing IoT systems, is there opposition from workers or unions? So if my job was the quality control guy for the steel that Ford Motor buys, and now my job is not needed because there's sensors that will tell the GUI if there's a problem.
Oh, you bet. Oh, you bet. So I work closely with a semi-governmental body called the Institute for Advanced Manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
Israel went to Germany a decade and a half ago, and they saw that the Germans are really at a whole different level at manufacturing. And they started this revolution called Industry 4.0. So the Israeli government decided that we should also take charge and created a body that pushes old style traditional manufacturing factories in Israel to become more advanced. The opposition to this process, so let's start with the positive. Many factories are accepting this gladly. We want to be in the 21st century. We don't want to be manufacturing like we're in the 19th century. Sure, we need the tech, we understand the benefits, we see the value, it's fantastic, we cannot operate any otherwise, so they adopt. On the other hand, you have huge factories, especially where I am. I'm located up north, and up north has way more than half of the Israeli industry, comparing to the center, where you have 60, 70% of the population, but let's say 15% of the manufacturing, versus the north that has about 15% of the population, but close to 60% of the manufacturing. Those massive factories still operate the old way, meaning you literally have a buzzer in the morning, you have buses bringing in workers, you have hundreds, sometimes thousands of workers that come, and they work in a traditional classic production line. Those guys don't want to change. Mm-hmm. They might adapt a piece of tech here and there, but as a process-wise, system-wise, there's not really that much desire to change.
Mm-hmm. How does the rollout of 5G affect deployments of IoT systems? Is it necessary to have 5G to have industrial IoT?
No, not really. IoT can function, that functions well on 2G. So even the role of 3G wasn't really that effective. Some specific fields, there's a subfield when it comes to cameras. Okay, analytics of video. For example, you install a camera, and that camera can recognize a component of a machinery. Like I manufacture jet engines. So instead of 20 people in control quality, I put one camera that can tell you and alert you if a component is bad. Because of the amount of traffic of the video, those need to be hardwired. You must pull a cable. But sometimes we're talking about hundreds of meters of cable and digging trenches for those cables. So now with 5G, perhaps they will be able to do it remote wirelessly. But besides that, not that much of an impact.
Okay. And how is the communication with the different sensors accomplished? Is it Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or internet? How is it?
So there's about 6 different technologies. starting from radio frequency, all the way to Bluetooth and proprietary protocol of communication similar to Bluetooth on a different band. That's the way the sensors communicate with the control unit, a controller or a hub, if they're wireless, of course, because obviously otherwise there's cables. And then the control unit usually communicates with a SIM card by GSM.
Mm-hmm. I would imagine one of the selling points is, of course, efficiency. You install IoT in your factory. Will be more efficient. It seems like everything's interconnected. And if there's one problem somewhere in the factory, the whole line might shut down. So if you can detect that beforehand and take care of the problem, then I guess a lot more efficiency would come out. And then the other thing, I would imagine that IoT could claim to be environmentally friendly or pro-green because less electricity might be used.
It's pro-green in many other ways. For example, let's talk about water quality for a second, okay? Water and in industry, as you know, industry pollutes water. It could be rivers, the seas, groundwater, you name it. With IoT, every supervising body, like Environmental Protective Services or the Ministry for Environmental Services across the globe, within, I would say, a day, they simply place water quality sensors all around the factory. And now the factory knows that they cannot dump anything or they cannot allow themselves to have any kind of malfunction, because within seconds, the supervisors or the body that's above them monitoring that will know, and they'll know exactly who polluted and with what. So that's a huge environmental impact. Then if we look at the water companies themselves, the efficiency grew by multiple times. The operation abilities, not just the quality of the water, but the efficiency. And obviously the electricity, obviously the amount of power now required in manufacturing or in infrastructure companies went down significantly.
Okay. Do some of the equipment manufacturers that be placed on their equipment, do they not only sell the equipment to the factory, but do they have a follow-on license to operate the IoT that's installed on the equipment they sell?
So that's one of the business models that everybody are after. Many IoT companies, like for example, I manufacture a sensor that broadcasts. So one of my potential customers would be any kind of equipment manufacturer. I'll go after Siemens and I'll say, listen, you manufacture turbines. Put my sensor inside your turbines, and then the turbine will be able to provide all the information to the customer, and I'll charge you a monthly fee for the data. So that's a business model that IoT companies are using.
Mm-hmm. Well, just about going back to the green issue for a moment, how much electricity does IoT demand? How much does it consume to power?
It's negligible. We're talking about if it's a sensor powered by a small AAA battery, sometimes it lasts years.
Okay. And then what kind of cybersecurity needs to be placed on IoT systems to make sure a bad actor doesn't try to cause damage at a factory?
So I by myself wanted to start a startup literally 2 weeks ago with this exact focus. I don't know if you saw in the news, but a couple of months ago, Iran hacked an Israeli water plant. Okay. So back at the day, when you saw a hacker attack, the hackers would hack a server, right? There's information on the server, they were going after the information. Nowadays, hackers know how to hack equipment. A hacker can hack into your vacuum cleaner. So Iranians hacked into a water treatment plant, and there was a mixer there that cleans the water by adding chemicals into the water. So once you have that, you can release an unhealthy amount of chemicals into the water supply. That's IoT, okay? So the layer of IoT required, especially in the industry, is very, very high, and there are strict protocols and a lot of demand.
Okay. And are there standards for IoT? So if I'm running the Ford factory and one piece of equipment just breaks down and I have to put a new piece of equipment in there, if I buy that with IoT, will it be compatible, or do I have to maybe make adjustments to it to bring it to compatibility?
There are so many companies out there, so there's two directions. One direction is that each company makes its own, not compatible to anyone, hardware and software. But then you have another kind of companies, it's not one, we're talking about dozens of companies, that they say our equipment will work with anyone. So if you have something that broke, our equipment can easily replace that.
Okay. So I guess like Apple and IBM. Apple like being the closed ecosystem, and the IBM model being more interoperable,
Yeah,
interchangeable. Yeah. Okay. How do you know that these sensors are working? If a sensor that's part of an IoT system, how do you know that that sensor is not defective? Are there usually lights that go on if there's a problem, or is it like a smoke alarm that beeps or something when it's not working?
So those sensors are usually very small. They're usually like something like this. Okay, they're like the size of a AAA battery or a little bigger. So the size of a finger, and they are constantly online. You program them. For example, you want to see information every 30 seconds. And if I don't see information, let's say for 2 minutes, I want to get an alert. I want to get an SMS notification. So you get a notification saying machine number 8 is no longer sending data. So you go and you have to look at it, look and see if something's wrong.
Okay. When you're selling the sensors by themselves, not in a situation where they're already installed on the equipment, but you're just selling like retrofits of sensors, what is the sales cycle like? Is it a very difficult sale? Is it a missionary sale? Or
so the sensors themselves nowadays are so abundant that you can buy them on AliExpress.
Okay.
The hardware, literally, you can buy on AliExpress for peanuts, single dollars.
Okay.
Once again, depends on what's the use case, right? We're talking about hundreds of use cases. Like if I want to detect water leaks, that will be like $3 a sensor. If I want to detect electricity spikes, presence of oil in water, if I want to measure, whatever, there's endless amount of parameters. So usually the sensors are dirt cheap, besides specific, very narrow use cases.
Mm-hmm. How sensitive? Yeah. How sensitive are the sensors? So so this is not a good example, but in brain surgery, you have to make sure that the floor is completely flat and that there's no movement of anything on the floor. So in maybe in semiconductors, you want a very, very high degree of precision, not just is the factory going to break down or is the machine going to break, but if something's off 100.
The sensors are extremely accurate. And once again, it's all about the price you're willing to pay. So the more precise, the more unique, the more robust of a sensor, the more it'll cost. But once again, the point here is definitely not the sensors. Everybody can manufacture sensors. I was astonished. I was blown away. When I started with IoT, let's say 15 years ago, I worked in a company that had dozens of engineers developing sensors and another few dozen of engineers developing the software to communicate with the sensors and give you the data. I went to an expo in Spain about 6 months ago, and a trade show, and that trade show had hundreds of manufacturers of both the sensors and the software, like the hardware and the software, and they all are offering it to you as OEM. They will be your manufacturer. You can slap your brand on our equipment. We'll customize it for you. You want a pink one in, I don't know, in carbon, or you want a green one in plastic, we'll make it any way you want. So the hardware is definitely not the key issue. Hardware is robust. The key is the software that comes with the hardware. Mm-hmm. Once again, the data can be provided by many, but what are you going to do with the data? What's the capabilities of manipulating it?
So that software that kind of reads what the sensors are, the data that the sensors are emitting, is that artificial intelligence, or is that a different kind of software that has to be placed on top of the initial software?
So there are different companies. I'll give you a simple example. Let's say you have a sensor that measures water leakage. The sensor every 5 seconds say no leakage, no leakage, no leakage. And you get a basic Excel file that says nothing, 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 nothing. That's a software. There's a software that tells you that there's no water leakage. A level above that, there's an algorithm. The algorithm is saying, if there is a water leakage, I want to get an alert. Okay? Still not artificial intelligence. This is still a basic algorithm. A level above that would be the ability to tell you, listen, there's a 70% chance that on Monday at 4 o'clock, you'll have a water leakage. Mm-hmm. That's artificial intelligence.
Okay.
That's a big game changer.
Okay. So you may not like this question, but more on the supply chain software side of things, do you think there's a little bit less interest in supply chain software now because of what we saw during the pandemic, that there were these big outages of supplies, the supply chains were broken in a lot of cases? Do you think more managers are saying, we would actually like to build up a little bit of inventory in case the supply chains break down, at least we'll have some product to sell? Or is there still very, very high demand for supply chain software?
The supply chain is an entirely different topic. We can spend hours talking about it. You see, it's all over the news all the time. It's all about the strategy, whatever strategy the company decides. So it all starts at the factory. Some factories manufacture to inventory. They know that they have no ability to ship. So they manufacture into inventory. Then you continue with the importer, the next step. Some importers import and they know that they have no ability to distribute. There's distribution issues, last mile, okay? There's tracking issues all over the States, all over the European Union. So those importers keep piling up containers wherever they can, in the warehouses, in the port. Then you have the actual distributor. The distributor is the one that buys the stock and sells it on. So how much can he possibly stockpile? Okay, if he gets a, 90% discount, will he buy it? Many of them, even if you give it to them for free, simply have nowhere to store it because of the way the distribution works. So it's a whole different story, and it's all about specific companies and their specific strategic decisions on the matter.
Okay. Maybe you can name a couple of Israeli companies that are involved in industrial IoT.
So perhaps, there's endless amounts. You can even Google it. There's top 30 Israeli companies that do IoT. Perhaps I can give you just, you just want a name and what they do. Well, one of my most heroic ones, a company that I admire, that they do something different. IoT now, there's some sort of a consolidation. It seems that everybody are doing kind of the same thing, okay? Just look at a cell phone, okay? A cell phone, doesn't matter if it's Samsung, Huawei, LG, SK, they're all kind of the same. You get your about 5-inch screen with about the same app, same camera, nothing new. With a few exceptions. So in IoT, there's an Israeli company called Augury. They are coming up with this new field. This is the new buzzword. The buzzword is called predictive maintenance, meaning I don't want to know what's happening now. I want to know what will happen tomorrow. Or in other words, let's say I have a machine. It costs me $100,000 to perform maintenance on it. And the manufacturer tells me that I need to do maintenance every 3 months, $100,000. So I just did maintenance. And a week later, the machine broke. Okay. So I wasted downtime, nothing works. I wasted money on fixing it, and I wasted money on an unneeded maintenance. Companies that claim that they have predictive maintenance capabilities, like Augury, they say we install sensors that measure various parameters, and then the AI is going to tell you not when you must do the maintenance according to the manufacturing spec, but when you actually need it. I can predict when it's going to go down. And those capabilities are mind-blowing. That's a game changer. That's why they keep getting heavily invested by everyone. They're spelled Augury, Augury. So they're basically an IoT company that does the hardware and the software, but the main key here is the artificial intelligence. Obviously, there are a few others that are trying to do that, but they're definitely one of the best. There's a few other ones. There's a company called Accense that narrows down and says we work only with supply chain. We're going to manufacture wireless disposable IoT sensors only for the supply chain, when the food industry. And that's you have on and on and on and on. And right now, I feel like we're about to see a revolution in technology. There's jumps every decade. There's a jump. So for the past decade, everybody were about the same, doing the same thing. I already see a jump in the software part, in the artificial intelligence. And now it's time for the hardware to do a jump. And I already see, I signed an NDA. So unfortunately, I can't tell you the name of the company. So as previously you asked me about power, and I said it's battery powered. So if it's battery powered, it still requires battery, and it's still polluting the environment. And let's say a company buys 300,000 sensors, so 300,000 batteries. A company developed a sensor that is the thickness of a sheet of paper that is self-powered. How can you self-power a sensor that looks like a little postal stamp? It is self-powered and it's broadcasting. Crazy, but true, happening. You'll see it in the news. And that's the direction we're going in.
I would imagine IoTs may cause havoc with service companies, the companies that service the equipment at the factories, because they probably like having schedules, like sending their people once a quarter to maintain the machines. And now with IoT, their people are needed at different times, so it might be hard to manage the scheduling.
So it's not only those are obvious, but then in large corporations, those are internal. So the people that are servicing the equipment are part of the maintenance department. If you look at Philips or Siemens, all of those guys, they service their own equipment internally. If you look at water companies or power companies, those are servicing the equipment internally. So for them, it's a big change.
Okay. Well, I think I'm out of questions. Is there anything else you think we should know about industrial IoT?
It's a revolution that happens slowly. Unlike many other revolutions that happen quickly, this one is happening slowly, but it is happening. So besides the institute that I mentioned previously, there's a few dedicated accelerators for startups in the industrial IoT. As you probably know, venture capitals and accelerators for startups are usually have some kind of a narrative or a topic. So all the medical ones are down south next to Beersheba and in the Negev. Jerusalem has its own. The high north, Katsarim, Kiryat Shmona, is food tech, specializing in food. And right here where I am in the Western Galilee in Carmiel, they now started an accelerator called the Accelerator for Advanced Manufacturing. They have in their second or third round already with dozens of startups applying. So you can see it's happening.
Okay, great. Well, I'd like to thank Tal Paperin for speaking to us about developments in Israeli industrial IoT. It was a great session. We talked about a lot of issues. You really informed us and taught us a lot about industrial IoT. So thank you. And I just to go back to what we were talking about at the beginning about the importance of salespeople is there's almost no product that is so good that it will sell itself. And there's, very few marketing campaigns that are so good that that's going to generate the demand and cause the sale. You really need salespeople to close deals. So whether you're an IoT company looking for help, Tal is a great candidate for that. Or if you have any other industrial products that you're looking to sell, I'm sure if you don't have time to work many hours for a client, you could probably run a training course for a day or two and polish up their salespeople and, probably make a big difference that way as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, David.